Hello and welcome to the Australian Small Business Podcast, the podcast that can only help your business survive but also thrive, powered by Happy HR, Australia's #1 HR resource for small businesses. I'm here with Chris Smith. Good morning.
G'day, Julian. How are you, mate?
I'm great. Once again, it seems like we say this at the start of every podcast. We wake up with some new rules around the COVID pandemic, around what businesses can and can't do, and takes us a while to work through it all, and we can only think what that's like for small business owners.
Absolutely. It's not an easy time for people right now.
It's not. And so today, we're really wanting to talk about how we can negotiate with our employees. So I think it's fair to say that pretty much every business in Australia is affected in some way, shape or form, and especially small businesses who may not have the infrastructure or financial backing to ride it out, they really need to be making the right decisions. And I know that the burden they have there is not only for themselves, but for their employees. Yeah. Would it be fair to say from the businesses that you work with that smaller businesses have a different culture? It's more intimate, personal. It's almost like a family when it's a small business.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of business owners have their home family, but they have their work family as well, definitely.
Absolutely, and that's something that they don't want to lose, their home family. But as we say, we need to protect the business first, but business owners are wanting to look after their employees. And so I think today, the topic now is talking about how to negotiate with your employees. So I think it's quite strange that we're not saying it for a win-win situation. It's more so for a survive situation, because we don't want to see your loyal employees be out of work. You don't want that, but also you don't want your business to go under. And I know that's something that a lot of business owners are walking the tightrope of maintaining the viability of their business while still being able to maintain and pay the staff that they love and are very loyal to.
Absolutely.
Is this something that you're dealing with regularly at the moment?
Yeah, we're really working with a lot of business owners to help them look at their cash flow. And many of these guys have got I suppose their thoughts around how can I keep these people gainfully employed, but what is my mechanism in order to do that?
And we have discussed this in length, talking about short-term pain for long-term sustainability, where sometimes having to significantly reduce staff hours or let staff go may be painful, but that's what's required to keep your business open. And it's that oxygen mask analogy. Look after the business first so you can provide and help people long term.
Correct, exactly right.
So just in very simple dot point form, Chris, when it comes to negotiating with employees, what are the types of things we could negotiate on?
Absolutely. So we've had a few. So first of all, can I reduce my staff hours? So by negotiation, yes, try to get them to work from 5 days to 4 or 5 days to 3. We're seeing a lot of that right now.
Okay, so we've got hours.
Yep.
What else can people negotiate on?
Some people are getting paid more than the award wage right now. Okay. So people are negotiating, let's say the award wage is $10 an hour and they're getting paid $13 an hour. Negotiating with that employee to actually just pay them the award.
Okay, so we've got hours.
Yep.
Like wage.
Yep.
Is there anything else we can negotiate on?
Look, realistically, they're the two until you start to go into redundancy.
What about things such as if there's any perks and benefits? There might be company car that they're paying for, or expenses or other benefits where they've got an allowance as part of the team culture. Is there anything like that?
I think, when it comes to commissions and so forth, they're still bringing commissions and so forth. That should still be paid. But I had a call yesterday from someone saying, well, they use the company car, but they're in the office mostly. Can I take that car away from them and sell that asset? The answer is yes, you can sell that asset and so forth. So depending on what the situation is, if you're paying a car allowance and they've got a lease that they're paying for, that would be something that is actually a commitment to that employee. So removing that car allowance at this point would be quite troublesome, and so that may not be something that you could do. So, but if you've got benefits where they've got an allowance where they get, $1,000 a quarter for professional development and those types of things, I think most people will realise that, yes, those benefits maybe need to be withdrawn for the next 2 quarters because of the situation we're all in. And I think most people will understand that. But they're not mechanisms of a salary, they're mechanisms of a benefit.
Right.
I think most people see the difference between the two. The car allowance thing is actually now at the moment quite problematic because, but if there's a lease involved, you need to keep paying that.
Okay, so we're looking there at, we've got hours worked, the salary, so the actual wage, and potential benefits and perks. So are you obliged to actually have to negotiate with an employee? I mean, at the end of the day, if you're the business owner, you make the decision, right?
Yeah, well, it is a negotiation actually. So if you say to an employee, look, I need to reduce you from 5 days to 4, and if the employee says, no, I don't accept that, you've got a contract with them, and 38 hours a week at X rate per year. So at the end of the day, if the employee says no, then you're in a position where you actually have to make them redundant, or you may need to make them redundant. So if the employee is not obliging there, you're going to be in that position.
Now, we'd like to think that most people are going to be quite understanding that these are extenuating circumstances where we all need to pull together a bit. But yeah, I think that we see that in extremely rare cases where people don't want to budge, and it makes for a very tough decision for the business owner, where instead of it being a negotiation, it becomes an all or nothing situation, which sometimes doesn't work well for the employee.
Yeah,
if that
absolutely
happens.
right.
So let's talk about hours, Chris, and negotiating hours. And what are some different strategies here? I know that you've mentioned that sometimes it could be reduced hours during the day. It could be working 4 days instead of 5. How do you negotiate that with the employees? Is it based on what they need? Is it based on what the company needs?
I think it's a balance between the two. I mean, some businesses will say, look, I'm going to reduce your hours by 2 hours a day, and that way I get you for 5 days a week, but you work reduced hours, which means you're working, say, 30 now instead of 38. I'm seeing a lot of that. I think as a two-way street, some businesses will say, look, work 4, take the Monday or the Friday off and just work 4. If you've got 2 people doing a role, you can stagger that. 1 week they work the Monday, they'll get the Monday off, the next week they get the Friday off, so you've always got somebody on roster. That sort of structure works. I think it's coming down to what's going to be the benefit for everybody, and if you can get that agreement that they're now working for, it really just comes down to working through that, so the employee and the business gets the maximum benefit from that negotiation.
Yeah, I think looking at the daily duties and the needs of the business. So like if you have someone who has to be available every single day for the operations, probably reducing their hours during the day is better. Whereas if you do have some roles where from them not being in the business for a whole day isn't actually going to affect the operations, probably giving them a 3-day weekend is going to be better.
Yep.
But as you said, making sure if it is reduced hours, try and stagger that so that it's not a ghost town in the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing a lot of employees, their knee-jerk reaction is, actually, I'll do 4 days. And then they're like, but I'm home anyway because I'm working from home right now. So I'm not going batty. I'm going to work 5 days for you and just work reduced hours because I really just don't want to be going stir crazy.
Need a bit of a
purpose. I'm seeing people actually opt for the reduction in hours per day, which is, I would say, 80% at the moment because they're not used to working from home and they're not wanting to go stir crazy.
Absolutely not. Now, speaking about salaries and wages, this is something that we had a conversation with someone about just the other day, and this was almost a huge mistake they were about to make. Because they were desperate to keep the employer was desperate to keep their job. They just came to us and asked. So I've negotiated. I'm going to pay them X amount per hour now, during this difficult time. Is that okay with you? And that X amount per hour was actually below the award rate. what's going to happen there?
Yeah, so straight away you can't do that. I mean, at the end of the day,
Even if the employee and the employee say, look, no, we'll shake hands on this. It's a gentleman and a woman agreement here that we're okay with that. We're cool, but
no,
isn't that cool?
it's called a sham contract, and you can't pay someone less than the award, even if everyone agrees. That's the law. Don't do it. We've seen these things being entered into or trying to be entered into, and the employee does in fact want to do the right thing by the business, but the law prevents that agreement from occurring. So please don't do it, because at the end of the day, let's say that relationship goes bad and that employee says, hang on, you underpaid me, then you're in a really pickle there. So
instead of saving money, it's actually costing you more.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, you're going to pay, so don't do it.
Yeah, that's something that I think is an easy mistake for people to make.
Very easy to make.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about things to consider when negotiating. And so we've spoken about like negotiating in regards to the types of things we can negotiate on, but what type of overall holistic business things do we need to consider? Do we need to negotiate with some employees and not others, or is there bigger picture things we need to think about? Obviously there we've mentioned that things you need to consider, well, what is the minimum I can pay people?
Yeah, look, you imagine you got a pie and you've got a wage cost percentage you need to hit because of your reduction in sales, and let's say your wage cost percentage is 38% or 45% of your operational COGS based on the reduction of salaries, and you have to work out what you can afford to pay. Now, some roles will remain 5 days a week because they're an operational role and they're just required. Other roles you'll need to reduce based on the business rationale that role can exist 3 days a week because of the reduction in sales. So you make that call based on the roles and responsibilities. They're the decisions you'll need to make. Understanding your business and what people do, and understanding that you've forecast X reduction in sales, that is going to help get you through and help make you negotiate the right outcome for all parties based on that scenario.
That's very, very fair. Now, the one thing I just wanted to touch on, and you sparked my curiosity when we're talking about negotiating around benefits and perks and things. Now, that is a tricky one when we come to the car situation. So let's say a business gives someone who's on the road all the time, they're not leasing the car for them. It's not a company car. They're giving them a car allowance, a fixed car allowance as part of their I guess their package and so on, but it's one part of the benefits. Well, let's say that your employees are overextended. They've decided, okay, I'm on the road, I've got an allowance, I'm going to go get a new car, I'm going to get a new Mercedes, and now they're leasing up to their eyeballs in repayments, and if you take that away for the survival of the business, that's going to seriously impact the employee. Now, just so we get it clear here, if an employee has done that outside of the business, you don't have any real obligation to have to honour that allowance, do you?
Look, it's part of the package, so
Okay.
it actually is part of that wage package. So I think in the circumstances, look, whatever they've leased, whether it's a Holden Barina or it's a Mercedes, at the end of the day, they've got a car allowance which is part of their package. So you're generally going to be negotiating their hourly wage, not that car allowance.
Okay.
So understand you need to be very, very careful around the areas around car allowances.
Right.
It is part of their package. You may keep the car package, but in that case, you may need to negotiate it down to 3 days. And if you can't, then you need to make them redundant, and then they've got no car allowance at that point.
Yeah.
So it's a negotiation with that particular employee to get and you used at the start of this chat today, you said survive. So the business needs to survive, the employee needs to survive. So what can be done in order to ensure that?
And that's why I'm asking these tricky questions, because these will come up.
Absolutely, and they're already coming up. And the car allowance one is part of the actual package. So look to reduce wage, not car allowances at this point would be my advice.
Okay. So can you negotiate different deals with different employees, or does it have to be the same across the board?
Look, I think it comes down to what that role is required to do. And if that role's like, you know what, you can do your role. Now, as an example, let's say you've got a you're in warehousing, okay, and you've got 70% reduction sales, right? So there's 70% less activity through the warehouse. You could say, we distribute on Wednesdays and Fridays, you're working 2 days a week.
Okay.
That may be the scenario for someone in that
Yep.
position.
But you could negotiate with a certain deal with one salesperson,
Yep.
and then another deal with a different salesperson?
I think it comes down to they may be working different markets, different areas.
Okay.
So it
But
really does.
So you can do that?
You can do that,
Okay.
absolutely.
So what would happen if all of a sudden the salesperson that you negotiated, you did a good negotiation with, so you can just state your full hours, and then the other salesperson who's maybe doing an identical job and identical performance you've negotiated a little bit harder with? I mean, obviously that's going to be a tough situation. So is there anything you need to mention to the person you've negotiated full hours with? I mean, is there any clauses and things that they need to know
I
about?
think what's important to mention here is if you do a deal with, I think you base it on roles.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing a negotiation for salespeople,
Mm-hmm.
everyone in that role gets the same deal.
Okay.
I think that way you don't upset the apple cart. Yes, at the end of the day, you can negotiate what you need to negotiate to reduce your staff cost percentage to meet your staff cogs. Simple as that. You need to do what you need to do. But, at the end of the day, if you group the negotiation by roles, what will happen is you'll retain your company culture.
Yeah, I think that's really big.
And you need to consider that because let me tell you, culture's king. And a lot of businesses that just because one guy's got a weaker personality than another, that is not a way to go into negotiation. That will erode your culture,
Yep.
and that's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, culture is king. Now, should these negotiations be confidential or should it be public to all of the staff?
I think it should be negotiated by confidentiality. At the end of the day, if you've got a decent employment contract, you've got confidentiality clause, you should remind them of that during that meeting. But if you're negotiating by groups, then the group would know and it's
Yeah.
going to get out. So as long as you're being fair to the group and they can see that you're generally doing everything to help the business survive, and people can see they actually understand this department's going to do this and this department's going to do that, and based on rationale, we need to negotiate these hours. I think people understand that they're in a group, the business is working through it, you're being as fair as you can. People understand. Most people do.
Yeah.
If people don't want to budget negotiate, then you've got provisions for redundancy. But most people are understanding right now. They're insinuating circumstances. We've got to get through this together. But negotiating in secret to one sales guy to another, that's going to then create a lot of cloak and daggers. And people will always assume the worst. And because they assume the worst, it's going to mean that they're going to think that one guy got a better deal than the other, and you could really lose everyone by doing that. Just don't do that. It's not culturally a very smart move.
As you said, culture is king, and I think that the businesses that can stick together in these times and each sort of, I guess, shoulder the load or the burden a little bit when we get out of this, it's going to be such a more galvanised group.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, look, that wraps up our podcast talking about negotiations. Now, of course, if there are any Australian small businesses right now quite concerned about how to negotiate with their staff or anything else during this this pandemic season we're going through, I believe that you're offering free advice via email to anyone, so they can just email you through with as much detail as possible, their query, and one of your qualified team will get back to them. Is that correct?
That's right. Just simply email help@happyhr.com and we'll take that, triage it, and get back to you with a really strong best practice response. And also what we've done is created some of these cheat sheets that people are really using to help them to negotiate fairly with staff to get them through, so they've got that long-term sustainability in their business, and people have been valuing those cheat sheets, and they're free, and we're here to help people.
Wonderful. No, that's fantastic. I think resources like that can guide people through these troubled times
Correct.
Are worth their weight in gold, but if we can give them free, that's fantastic. And also the free risk assessment report on the website, happyhr.com. That's a free resource as well, where people can complete the 5-minute questionnaire, answer a few questions about their business, and they can find out their HR health score, which will outline how well they're doing things, the areas they're lacking, the risks to that, but most importantly, how they can improve their business. As we've spoken about, getting your HR and employee relations and processes right now is so important because you can't afford any slip-ups. What's been the response to that so far, Chris?
It's been absolutely crazy. The amount of people doing risk assessments right now has been overwhelming. It's been awesome. But what's been great is they're using that because they now know where they're at and what they need to do. It's an orange button on the website. Click on it, as you said, 5-minute response and 5-minute questionnaire. You get what you need.
The response is even quicker than 5 minutes, isn't it?
It comes
immediate.
to you straight away. It's immediate, and it's just great that people are taking HR seriously and actually doing something about it. It's just wonderful. It really is.
They can get it sorted out now. Like, there may be a little bit of downtime in the chaos to sort this out, and it's something that's been in the back of people's minds because we know small business owners here in Australia, they get into business because they love their profession or their trade, and HR really isn't, as we say, the most exciting or sexy part of running a business. But if we get this right, it just allows them to spend more time doing the things that they love.
Absolutely correct.
So check that out at happyhr.com. But Chris, it's been a pleasure as always. Until next time.
Pleasure. Thank you, mate.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
soon. Bye.
Take care.